Shall I introduce the next thing? Because it's Carol Penn. Yeah. I invite people to stand, move around, and be guided in some creative movement brought to us by Dr. Carol Penn, who is an expert in the whole field of spirit, body, mind, health. And so, Carol Penn, take us away.
Hello and welcome. You are #Meditation Nation and you are a VIP. Welcome to my meditation studio with Dr. Carol. Congratulations and thank you so much for registering for my first time ever webinar, Meditation in a Time of Madness, Change Your Mind, Change Your Life. I am so excited, and as promised, here is your bonus video as we learn how to stabilize and balance our emotions, not just verbally, but also in mind, body, and spirit. It's really awesome. I'm going to introduce you on just a very beginner level to the 5-organ Chinese system, 5-organ system, and also to the 5 major emotions that we'll be working with and balancing today. Please remember that any information that you receive here today is strictly and purely educational. It is not meant to diagnose or treat. And before you engage in any physical activity, remember to be medically optimized by working with your healthcare, health and wellness team, your healthcare professionals, and your primary care doctor. Of course, I had to put that in after all, #I am doubly board certified as a family medicine doc and in obesity medicine. So without further ado, let's get into our bonus feature. So if you were with me on the challenge, you know that we talked about our emotions and the importance of balancing our emotions. I'm also going to introduce a very simple Qigong flow or movement flow to you. When I move, I want you to always move to the right. When you see me step to the right, I'll also be backing away so that you can get a better view of the lower half of my body. But let's look at the emotions first. We always need to balance anxiety to joy. So anxiety can become joy, and you know that even too much of a good thing is not a good thing. Sometimes if we're overstimulated with joy to the point of exhaustion, that can also flip and become anxiety. So we want to be able to balance in both directions. So the opportunity is to balance anxiety and joy. The elements of this emotion is fire, and our organ system Qi, or energy, is from the heart. Next, we're going to look at balancing grief to empathy. The element is metal, and our organ system Qi is from the lung. Next, we are going to balance anger to discernment. The element is wood, and our organ system Qi is the liver. From there, we're going to balance overthinking and clarity. The element is earth, and the organ system Qi, or energy, is the stomach. And finally, we are going to balance fear and intuition. The element is water, and the organ system Qi is from the kidney. All right, so we're going to do heart, lung, liver, stomach, kidney in that order. All right, so I don't know if you want to write any of this down, but if you do, take a moment now. Now is your opportunity. Once more, we're going heart, lung, liver, stomach, kidney. And when we look at the heart, we're balancing anxiety and joy. When we look at the lung, we're balancing grief and empathy. When we're looking at the liver, we're balancing anger and discernment. When we're looking at the stomach, we're balancing overthinking and clarity. And when we look at the kidney, we're balancing fear and intuition. All right, so before we go into our movement, I just want to share a few thoughts about this. And I want you to begin to think that each movement in and of itself is a complete practice. In the way of thinking in Chinese medicine, it's all about balancing. So any one of the movements is in fact adaptogenic. Now that word adaptogenic means it is able to go where it needs to go in any given moment. So you can also think of it just like when we take a medication. So the medication might be for our blood pressure, for example, but it goes through our entire system. So hence we have to be aware of the impact it might have on other parts of our physiology as well. So this, in the same way, these movements are adaptogenic. And what's so lovely about them is that they balance wherever they end up in terms of the activation and the energy. So I'm not going to spend too much more time talking. I want us to get into this very gentle, this beginner flow. I'll be moving back and forth away from the camera and towards the camera to give you the best views possible. And let's have some fun with this, all right? So we know that movement is my medicine, and I hope that after this, it'll be yours. All right, here we go. Let's rub our hands together. We're going to activate chi or energy. And as you're rubbing your hands together, you might begin to notice heat, tingling, some sense of energy. And it's perfectly fine if you don't notice anything at all. This is not about judgment. This is about being. So take a few nice deep breaths. Keep rubbing, and when you notice a sense of vibration, heat, or energy, slowly start to bring your hands apart. And if you'd like, you can even close your eyes. And you might begin to notice and feel a sense of some energy between the hands, and go ahead and form that into a ball shape, okay? Just a ball shape, and enjoy that. And remember, it's perfectly fine if you don't notice anything at all, whether you're a beginner at this or advanced. Each day is a new day, and each day is different. So we're going to take our chi ball, our energy ball, and hold it right in front of our heart center as we activate the organ system energy of the heart. And we move into a sense of joy. You extend the hands forward, open out, come back together, and float toward the heart. Beautiful. It can be done standing. It can be done sitting down in a chair. It can even be done lying down in a bed. So the feet are together in a parallel position. Beautiful. And I often like to imagine that I'm just opening my heart, healing my heart, shifting away from any sense of anxiety or disappointment. Remember, you could do this for 1 or 2 movements, or you could do it for 1 or 2 minutes or longer. Do it until it feels complete and right for you. Next, we move to the lung. We're going to activate the organ system energy of the lung. The arms are out. They come down and swoop up toward the mouth and swoop down and out. I often think of this as spreading my wings. Yes. And I move from my grief into empathy. Balancing, balancing. Taking deep breaths with each movement. You might breathe in and then breathe out. For our purposes right now, I'm not going to get into too much of that. I just want to remind you to breathe. And again, the whole movement. I'm raising up on the balls of my feet. And next, we're going to get into activating the organ energy of our liver. Our liver. And as we do our liver, we're going to move from anger to discernment. So you're going to turn to your right side, step out a little bit with your right foot. Your right hand will go on the bottom at the side of your torso, left hand on top, and you slide down as far as it's comfortable for you to do so, bending the knees. You push out, keep pushing, and tumble the hands one over the other, palms facing your eyes. You actually also activate your eye organ energy system with this beautiful combined movement, right? So I'm going to move back so you can see, stepping out to the right, right hand lower, we come up and tumble. We come down, we step out into a deep lunge, pushing away to tumble. Slide down as far as it's comfortable for you to do so. Push away, come up and tumble. And again, you do this once or twice, or just as long as you want until you feel complete. And I imagine that I'm melting my anger away and letting the anger teach me what it needs to teach me as I focus on the emotion of discernment and the usefulness of that. Now we're going to keep tumbling right over top of our head as we go to activate the stomach. And this time, left hand goes lower. We're going to slide down the torso and we push out. And we come back to the mouth. We slide down and we push out and we come back to the mouth as we balance overthinking to clarity. How important and how useful is that? As so often we stop ourselves from doing what we know we need to do because we are overthinking. So here I'm going to come back again so you can see my feet. You're going to step out with the left foot, push away, come to the mouth. And I love this because I often think of, what am I eating today? What emotions am I eating? What feelings am I eating? As we balance overthinking to clarity. Activating the organ system of the stomach. And finally, we're going to activate the kidney. And we're going to go to our right first. And this has a sound to it. So one hand is in front, the other hand is back, framing where our kidneys literally sit in this retroperitoneal space in our body. And it looks like swoosh, swoosh. And it's a sound, it's a sound. Here we go. And again, how long you do this? You do it as long as it feels good with the sound. where we are balancing fear to intuition, fear using our intuition. Beautiful, beautiful. You all look fantastic doing this. All right, so, roll your shoulders back. So that ends our journey through our 5-organ system today. Be sure to stay tuned for more. I hope you find this useful on your journey in your meditation practice, on your journey of optimizing your health and wellness. I cannot wait for you to join us on the webinar, Meditation in a Time of Madness. Change your mind, change your life. From my heart to your heart, namaste. Ubuntu, namaste. I see the light in you, you see the light in me. Ubuntu, I am all of who I am because of all of who we are collectively as we build this global village. This is your host, Dr. Carol, and you've been in the meditation studio. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Carol Penn. I'm breathless. This was good exercise and good for my heart and my soul. We're turning now to a presentation by the wonderful Crystal Charley-Sibley. She comes to us from the wonderful Salvation and Social Justice organization in New Jersey, who also brings heart and soul to the work of justice. We are so pleased to have Crystal with us. Her title today is Health, Justice, and Bias. And thank you, Crystal, for joining us today. I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Carol. It is a pleasure to be here and an honor to represent Salvation and Social Justice. Salvation and Social Justice, we seek to liberate public policy theologically by building Black faith-rooted communication strategies, advocacy, and public education campaigns to lift up poor, underserved, and traditionally oppressed communities, with a particular focus on racial justice through abolition, restoration, transformation, and coalition. I want to talk briefly about our theory of change before I jump into the topic of the day. Our theory of change starts with lament, testimony to truth, rooted in Black faith and liberation theologically. The theology voice is given as a testimony to the impact of systemic racism by the most impacted. This witness is not performative pain, rather a truth-telling moving toward liberation, right? So that's step one in our process. And I want you to understand just how salvation and social justice moves this process forward so you understand the journey when I talk about our Black health revolution. So we go from testimony to truth to our prophetic outcry, community as wellness, community as witness. Those most impacted identify evil and injustice as communities help shape the prophetic demands for just public policy. From there, we transition into rituals as resistance. We organize, organize, organize. The prophetic outcry is given strategy and tactics to directly target the systems producing pain. Healing is the complete transformation of the system as well as the realization of the prophetichood or power of the people. Then we move into salvation, healing by community. As organizing gathers forces and the structures crumble and changes begin to advance, we also bear witness to Black joy, discipleship, and calling In this context, individuals are healed, saved by the power of community, by beloved community. And lastly, we see liberation, equity, and transformation. While never complete, we bear witness to the signs of kingdom, and just policies are established, and systems are transformed, and we see the prophetic outcry now as visionary. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is quoted as saying, "Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and the most inhumane." Just a year ago, Salvation and Social Justice launched our Black Health Revolution with the release of our healthcare report entitled Break Every Chain from the Cradle to COVID-19, Racism in New Jersey Healthcare, and the Call for Justice. This comprehensive report takes us from the cradle to present day, closely examining the quality of life for Black residents in New Jersey through the lens of health equity. The view is pretty abysmal. You see, Black sisters and brothers are in the fight of their lives, for their lives, from the first day of their lives, really beginning before that, but we'll get into Black maternal health as I go on with my presentation. From the cradle to COVID-19, allow me to share with you some excerpts from our report and guide you on the path that has led us to our Black health revolution. Black New Jerseyans are dying at alarming rates due to COVID-19. As reported by NewJersey.com, although Black residents compose just 14% of the state's population, they represent 21.3% of the state's fatalities due to COVID-19. The CDC recently indicated that although African Americans compose 13% of the United States population, they represent 33% of the hospitalizations due to COVID-19. And these are statistics as of 2020. So we know at this point, the numbers are actually probably higher. The present pandemic is magnifying decades of systemic racism throughout our healthcare system. It is not the brutality of a knee to the neck, but the backroom murder of policies that continue to suffocate Black New Jerseyans through a system that is working exactly as it is designed to work. Systemic racism robs Black citizens and residents of life every day through segregated poverty, by denying access to nutritious foods and exposing individuals to stress and trauma, by eliminating access to preventative health care and limiting financial resources to secure basic essentials, and by demanding strenuous work with little or no access to paid leave, sick days, or retirement. As indicated in the Souls of Poor Folks study, there is a correlation between the states that refuse Medicaid expansion and those that enacted racist voter suppression laws in the last decade. You see, racism as a system is not limited to one area of public life. Privatized healthcare is 21st century segregation. Moreover, it is being promulgated in a state that espouses progressive values while employing Jim Crow policies. That is our New Jersey. That is our New Jersey. So to properly care for our Black bodies, we must revolt. The disparities in equitable access to quality healthcare and healthcare delivery has been present long before the pandemic of today. However, COVID-19 has placed a spotlight on the inequities we all were well aware of prior to now. It is said that pre-existing conditions are what contribute to these disparate statistics for Black individuals. Yet at the very root of the pre-existing conditions is the systemic racism embedded in the social determinants of health, including nutrition, housing, air quality, and early childhood experiences. Efforts to improve healthcare and healthcare equity must also be supplemented with measures to address the environmental conditions that affect a broad range of health functioning and quality of life outcomes. Again, the social determinants of health. The availability of nutritious foods is a significant social determinant of health. Food insecurity has been linked to poor overall health and the development of various chronic health conditions, including diabetes, asthma, and depression. Health is impacted by all of the systems of our lives. Black residents who are living in poverty are more likely to be exposed to environmental hazards, including air pollution and lead contamination, and are less likely to be the recipients of remediation for environmental disasters or climate crisis, despite being on the front lines. As described by the New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance, 74% of sites that have known environmental hazards because of previous land use are located within or adjacent to poor, indigenous, and/or Black communities. Now let's return to the front lines for a moment. As is quite evident in the COVID-19 pandemic, many poor or low wealth residents are working in industries that are hourly and provide little or no health care, right? No health insurance, no medical or disability leave. In the current crisis, we've seen fast food workers, grocery store workers, they've become essential. And yet the vast majority have no access to healthcare. And certainly, early in the pandemic, many of them had no access to PPE. Again, the private system of healthcare has ensured that the widows and the poor of this generation, your working mothers, grandparents who have been forced back to work because their retirement was insufficient, and the worker who is making ends meet, the one who stands in between the anti-masker and subsequently ends up sick and is without leave or insurance should they become ill. And also, oh, by the way, they're not afforded any time off either when they become ill. To protect Black bodies, we must revolt. Inadequate preventative care disproportionately impacts Black communities. We're going to go from food deserts to healthcare deserts. Many Black communities not only lack access to private physician practices, but also have limited or no preventative care facilities. The culmination of this is that Black people frequently do not receive preventative care, which in turn leads to higher rates of emergent and clinic visits. In fact, 7 out of 10 deaths, hear me again, 7 out of 10 deaths are caused by often preventable conditions, including heart disease, stroke, diabetes, injuries, or some types of cancer. Man, I'm starting to see a pattern here, a cycle, a system. Yeah, it's a system. Definitely a system. Systemic racism. The future of Black bodies is counting on us. We must revolt. Before we get to the future, let's talk a little more about the past. Let's talk about the historical context. We look at COVID-19, and many of us, for those of us who strongly recognize that these disparities have long been here, look at this as the sheets have been pulled back. But some of us are really starting to question, how did we get here? So for those of us who are asking that question, I'm so glad you did. When we look at how the disparities have gotten to be so wide in the healthcare spaces, I want to take you all the way back to the Brown versus Board of Education. That victory opened up the doors where we want to see the same type of equality, which is something that I'm not always the biggest fan of because it doesn't always meet our needs. When we fight for equality, we have to fight for equity, right? But that's for another day. When we start looking at Title VI and Medicaid, that was probably the first time that we started to see the widening of the healthcare disparities, because Medicaid was the first time where you start to see a healthcare structure that didn't allow for discrimination with public funds. And all of the focus was on hospitals. How were hospitals implementing the use of those funds? And while everybody was monitoring hospitals, nobody was monitoring private healthcare settings. Nobody was monitoring nursing home settings. And so you start to see the privatization of private physicians, nursing home settings. They became more privatized, and you start to have less and less of access for Black communities and for those type of services, and hospitals were the ones that were quote unquote being integrated. But look where we're at now. So now we have healthcare deserts in Black communities. And when you start looking at numbers that were supposed to go in the better direction because of Title VI, they've actually gotten worse. Right here in New Jersey, and we'll start to look at our future, right here in New Jersey, when it comes to your maternal health outcomes have gone in the wrong direction. In fact, they're twice as bad over the last 25 years. So let's look at that. In fact, we're going to turn our attention to the cradle. The immoral treatment of Black mothers in New Jersey has resulted in devastating and grave consequences for both mother and baby. In New Jersey, a Black woman is 7 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications as opposed to their white counterparts. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stop and say 7 times more likely to die than their white counterparts.
7 times more likely to die.
7 times more likely to die. And if that number isn't scary enough, that number it parallels to the number of the near misses and the moms who suffer when it comes to the morbidity. A Black boy is 3 times more likely to die before age 1 than a white baby, with significantly higher rates of Black babies being born prematurely. I myself am a mother of a preemie and a preeclampsia survivor. New Jersey is among the highest in the nation for the largest racial gaps for infant and maternal mortality. We have our work cut out. Again, it is systemic racism that is a barrier to equitable access to quality health care, and large in part, racial biases in delivery of equitable health care services to Black mothers. To birth healthy Black babies, we must revolt. The level of illness confronting Black communities is exacerbated by negative social determinants and the criminalization of Black communities and Black bodies. Continued stressors from systemic racism, increased needs for mental health care, weathering. Yet again, the racism throughout the present system ensures that mental health crises are not met with adequate community responses, but instead with criminalization. From the brutality of Black bodies by the police in New Jersey to the incarceration rates of Black people with underlying mental health needs, systemic racism both creates the mental health crisis and then punishes those with the mental health crisis and expressions of generational oppression and poverty. Yet we are not talking about a broken system, rather a system rooted in bigotry that is functioning optimally as designed. You see, we have read the fine print and implore each of you to do the same. The reality is that Black people are endangered species as a result of the actual policies on the books. When Salvation and Social Justice put out and released this report is about, I want to say, oh my goodness, about 14 pages, something that would take me far more than the time allotted today to go through every single section. But it is not without prophetic demands. You see, it's not enough to just identify the problem. You have to come to the table with a solution. And I want to go over our prophetic demands with you today. Number one, we want to see the enactment of universal health care immediately. The Affordable Care Act simply is not enough. Two, we'd like to see a prioritization of Black maternal health. 7 times more likely is just 7 times too many. We want to see New Jersey integrate healthcare. The Office for Civil Rights must enforce Title VI compliance. 4, divest from militarization and criminalization and invest in mental health care and community wellness. 5, transform the use of healthcare to include the social determinants of health. 6, adequately fund and empower the Office of Minority and Multicultural Health. 7, establish adequate, accessible, preventative care in Black communities. 8, mandate racial impact statements for all healthcare legislation. 9, provide accessible testing centers. And 10, ensure uniform methods of data collection. You see, we are putting you on notice that we are breaking the chain of disparate access to preventable illness, such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol, Black maternal morbidity and mortality, breaking the chain of shame because of one's mental health by promoting community wellness. This data and these ideals are reflective of the pervasive forms of inequality, inequity, and injustice in healthcare that were referenced by Dr. King over 50 years ago, just as reflective of inequality, injustice, and inequities that persist today. This is immoral, inhumane, and these conditions are unacceptable. I share with you our prophetic demands because it is our expectation that everyone watching everyone participating, everyone who knows someone who is a voter, recognizes that this year is an election year in New Jersey and all seats are up. You have the ability to help us make those prophetic demands come to fruition. Make sure your legislators are behind this kind of work. These are the reasons why you have them in the seats in the first place. These are the things that they should be behind. These are the ways they represent your voice. If these aren't things you've heard your legislators talk about, if these aren't the things that they've already voted for and they haven't gotten behind, it's a good reason not to vote for them in November. And so finally, I want to say to you, before we move into question and answer and talk more about what this health justice look like, I want to say to you that we find ourselves in a Lazarus moment. As the story teaches, so they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you would always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said unto them, "Take off the grave clothes and let them free." In New Jersey, as the entombment of slavery is shattered, we find now the commandment to live into this liberation call, one that is birthed of the collective. Salvation is never individual, but always arising by and within the community. So this salvation is as deliverance or redemption that in healthcare requires the government and public systems to unbind the Lazarus among us, to remove the grave clothes and truly release the people. Abolition of slavery necessarily calls our government into the transformation of public systems away from racism toward liberation. Today, this liberation, this Lazarus moment, calls for a movement that establishes fully funded public health care, affirming healthcare is a human right, and transforming public health to center Black lives. This is the Black health revolution, raising our communities to revive, thrive, and rejoice. Thank you for your time.
Wow. Crystal, thank you so much. That was such a powerful presentation and so deep in the information you've presented and the extent of the concern. It's absolutely mind-boggling. I'm sure some of us have heard a few of those figures before. And I know from some personal accounts of the difficulties that Black women face in the process of giving birth. But the extent of it beyond just that is extraordinary. Thank you. So let's take advantage of this moment. Are there questions here in the room with Crystal or virtually on the screen? Good. Reverend Webb has a question for her.
A couple times you mentioned that you say more about what that means to you and what it looks like from the perspective of salvation and social justice, or just in general?
So thank you for that question. So what that looks like, I'll answer from both perspectives. And I think that they're kind of one and the same, but I guess there is a slight difference. For me personally, as I stated earlier, I am a preeclampsia survivor. And so I recognize that, the comorbidities is really a serious issue. And I recognize for the first time what it really means when weathering starts to interfere or starts to really have a prominent role in the space of, like your health, right? And your day-to-day and how it can interfere with something that you're trying to get done. And in that instance was trying to carry a baby to full term. And I wasn't able to do it, and so when it comes down to revolt, when it comes down to Black bodies and me personally, I take a real hands-on role for my preventative healthcare. I make sure that I go to my annual OB, my GYN appointments, my primary care. I check in with a mental health clinician if I feel like I need to do so. I'm on top of my dental. I'm on top of my, I make sure I do my eye appointments. I try not to leave any stone unturned when it comes to my health. That's important. And unfortunately, the healthcare deserts do exist, and I am fortunate and I'm blessed that I have the means of transportation to get to my appointments. And that makes it a little easier for me. But when it comes down to salvation and social justice, our fight is to make sure that everybody has the same opportunities, making sure that we're starting to see all those same areas of healthcare in Black communities so that everybody has the same access. And so we definitely, we've been working really hard on not just getting all those type of healthcare services in the community, but like one area that we're fighting for right now, and we've been fighting for all along, and we're at a really pivotal point, is the Cover All Kids legislation, right? That's our first step towards healthcare as a human right. Many people may not know that did pass, that we're gonna have Cover All Kids in New Jersey, but what has to happen now? Yes, it was signed in the legislation, but now we have to see what the implementation looks like, right? And so we're working really rigorously to make sure that that rolls out in a way that is equitable, so that, the pediatricians are in the Black communities, and that, that they're in the immigrant communities, and so that they're not overlooked there. So when we say revolt, it means we're not going to allow things to continue as status quo, where, you see better access to healthcare in suburban communities only. And we continue to see this division and this segregation in healthcare spaces. Thank you.
Crystal, I'd love to follow up on that for a moment. This may be an ignorant question, but help me understand the distinction you were making between public and private health care. I guess I'll leave the question there and let you help us understand better.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Carol. So public health care settings are usually, when we're talking about public health care settings, you're looking at like your hospital settings. And when you're talking about types of insurance accepted. So you're looking at like your Medicaid and Medicare, right? If you're talking about seniors. And so what happens is, like if a private practice, something that's not federally funded healthcare spaces, if there's a lot of private practice doctors, they're not obligated to accept federally funded healthcare. They're not obligated to accept Medicaid, right? And so they often, if they don't accept it, they're often not practicing in places that heavily relies, or the population heavily relies on that as their insurer. So therefore, you don't have a lot of those private practices in your urban or low income communities. Is that helpful?
Yes, that helps. Thank you.
Okay.
I jumped in. Are there other people with questions or comments?
Carol, I have a question.
Good.
Okay.
Go for it.
I wonder, I know the Murphy administration has an initiative on maternal health, spearheaded by the First Lady, focusing on, people of color. Do you think, what they've put forth is adequate? Do you think sorry, my dogs. Do you think it's adequate, and do you think that it's likely to show success? I mean, they've moved quite a ways into it, and I'm just wondering like how you feel about it, what they've done so far.
Thank you for that question. I am very happy to see the Nurture New Jersey efforts. Their strategic plan is a very comprehensive plan, and it really lays out what is actually happening in New Jersey. I think it's actually a very, I think it's a plan that does not cover up anything, which is really nice, given that it comes directly from the Murphy administration. It's very transparent. And I think that the goals are, I don't want to say lofty because I don't want to seem like I'm not optimistic, but the work is cut out for us in New Jersey. And what I will say is that if we achieve the goals that are laid out in that plan, New Jersey will be much better for it. One thing I will always say, though, is that when it comes to the Nurture New Jersey plan or any other plan, is that you have to be really mindful of what is the funding looking like behind it, right? A report that comprehensive, if there is not proper funding behind it, then it can kind of start to look like rhetoric. And so I do continue to watch the funding sources. One of the things that came about early on in the Murphy administration under First Lady Tammy Murphy was the Community Doula Project. And that was like a really great pilot program. They had a community doula pilot program in Essex County and Camden County and Atlantic County. And those are your three counties with the highest premature babies and the highest infant mortality counties. And what they did was they got together a couple cohorts of women who had to identify as Black women. And they were trained by the Uzazi village. And it was a really heavily culturally competent model of community doula care. And it offers doula services to women who otherwise may not be able to afford doulas. And doulas are really helpful, and this is backed by data, in birthing spaces in reducing negative birth outcomes, right? So, that had a great deal of funding behind it, but unfortunately, it is my understanding that some of that funding may be going away at the end of this time, right? So I'm kind of watching what that looks like in the overall picture when it comes to the Nurture New Jersey strategic plan, because if you lose that doula component, it makes me wonder what else, what are you going to do with the funding? What else is going to be supplemented? Because, to really continue to make the changes and to meet those goals, you're going to need your funding, and the doula project is something you definitely need to continue to fund. I would just say stay tuned, but I do think it's been a great thing to see First Lady Murphy take on maternal health in New Jersey, because it has started to really at least highlight it and make it something that people are talking about that weren't talking about it. And for those, again, I'm one of those people who definitely pushes the fact that if your legislators aren't working for you, to vote them out. One of the things that New Jersey has done that's a great thing is made so that doulas are now eligible to be paid through Medicaid. But let me share something with you that I didn't share in my presentation about Black maternal health, right? So the doula pilot program is great to meet one small component of the Black maternal health crisis, your low-income moms, right? Low-income moms are able to get a doula, a community doula, through the community doula projects, right? Community doula pilot projects. And that helps the low-income moms with lower their birth outcomes. But guess what? In Black maternal health, mothers who have more advanced education and higher income have the worst outcomes. So they are the ones who really need your doula support, and insurances don't cover doulas. And by the way, I am a doula. Okay.
Wow.
And I became a doula because I am a preeclampsia survivor. And so doula is my ministry. And so what I recognize is when I look at the Nurture New Jersey, again, I'm not here to poke holes, but I look at it, I look at the Black maternal health crisis in its totality. So I do think it's a great report, but I do think that there are some gaps. So if you lose the community doulas, it hurts our lower income moms. And guess what? You're not even addressing the ones who are actually on the further deep end of Black maternal health at all.
Thank you for that information.
Quite welcome.
Are there other questions that people would like to address to Crystal? Well, people are thinking, I have one more that I'd like to ask. You referred to health deserts. Do you have any thoughts about how we go about increasing accessible medical services where they're so rare?
A couple things. One of the things that we do at Salvation and Social Justice, when we like to do things, a couple things. We love for our work to be community led, right? When I was talking about our theory of change, we like things to be led by impacted voices. But another thing we do is we like to do what we call asset-based community development. And when you look at asset-based community development, you're looking at the assets you already have in the community, and you're able to identify what's there, and you're also able to identify what's missing. Now, when you look at systemic racism and you're starting to look at your asset mapping and you're looking at healthcare, for instance, right? You have to look at it for everything. So what else is missing in your, not only are the facilities themselves missing, but in certain areas you have a very limited transportation system. What do the transportation schedules look like to get to the facilities where they are located, right? How often are they running, right? So you have to start looking at it's so much more than just the facility itself. How do you incentivize getting practitioners into the urban areas? You have to start looking at your legislators again, right? And really more so your federal legislators, because it also has to do with reimbursement amount. Private insurance reimburses at higher rates. And so physicians don't necessarily want to accept the Medicaid rates because it's the lower reimbursement. So when we're looking at how do we correct this, we have to attack a lot of different areas, right? We have to look at the insurance area itself. We have to look at medical schools and what, thinking about the model of care and what people are going to school for. Here's the other thing you think about: student loan debt, right? When you go to school, you're trying to think about your return on investment. So you go to school and you're going to amass a lot of student loan debts. You're not necessarily wanting to come out and getting the insurance that is going to give you the lowest reimbursement rate. We have a lot to correct in this country.
Wow.
We have a lot to correct in this country. And we're doing it. And what we're doing is we're trying to go up against, at least for the sake of this particular conversation, at least 300 years of oppression. We know systemically, Black people have been oppressed for over 400 years. But when you're looking at like the formalized healthcare system, you know, you're looking at, 300 years. You know, Black women couldn't even birth in hospitals to the 1950s. So, this is, and at the same time is when you're starting to look at when, Medicaid was starting to kick into effect, right? So from the very beginning, the first thought process was how do we segregate when Title VI went into play? The timing literally lines up.
Wow. Wow. Crystal,
Yes.
thank you so much for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
You've given us so much knowledge and so much to think about.
Thank you.
I'd like to speak to the whole audience briefly. We're going to take another brief break, but the remaining part of the afternoon is the workshop part. Kerwin Webb is going to come back and help us think about what do we do. Carol Watchler and Ted Fetter are going to be doing a workshop on taking the health concerns that you have outlined so well, Crystal, into what can be done in local communities. And then we will wrap up with a workshop by some of the youth in New Jersey connected with Unitarian Universalist Faith Action, who have been working on how to get the schools to do a better job of racial education within their system. And boy, do they have messages for how we can act. So thank you again, Crystal. We will take a few minutes break and then come back with Reverend Kerwin Webb and an active workshop. So stretch your muscles and be prepared to come back and work. Thank you.
When was the last time you had a vacation that was both relaxing and spiritual, rejuvenating and principled while tapping into your inner peace and inherent worth? Can't remember? Well, have we got a place for you? Murray Grove Retreat and Renewal Center in Lenoka Harbor, New Jersey. Come stay in one of our guest houses or try a more rustic break from life in one of our campsites. Sample the delicious food prepared by staff chefs. Relax under the shade of our many trees or take a hike to the bay by passing the site of Thomas Porter's original homestead. Be mindful and spend quiet time reflecting while walking the labyrinth. And don't forget, when it's time to cool off, take a dip in our refreshing pool. There are many local attractions as well as upcoming events right here on campus, which include the Joyous Women's Retreat in early November and the event of the year, Homecoming celebration right here at Murray Grove. For more information, visit murraygrove.org or call 609-693-5558. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mona Washington, and I'm on the staff here at Murray Grove. It's my pleasure this afternoon to reintroduce you to Reverend Kerwin Webb, who is going to talk to us about practical problem solving. He is from the Second Baptist Church of Asbury Park, and he will introduce the format of the workshop. Reverend Webb.
Hi, it's great to be back for this second half. For those of you who've been with us throughout the day, it has been a wonderful day of information and learning. And this part is what I'm most excited about, because we always hear, it's always easy to hear about the problems or the challenges, the things that are wrong or the things that need to be fixed. And too often we don't leave enough time for the practical problem solving, for the solution seeking. And so that's why I'm excited for this portion of this presentation. This is our workshop portion. And so what I'm hoping that you will do with me is that we can all brainstorm together and figure out how we all in our lives, in our agencies or our organizations and institutions, how we are able to collectively problem solve and make things happen, so that we don't just come here and get filled with a lot of information and then go away feeling depressed or down that things are so bad. But hopefully we can come away from this with some action steps as to how it's been done in other places, or how we can do things in our communities to make a difference. So this one, I wanted to be interactive. I don't have prepared remarks that I'll go through, but I'll just tee us up and say those areas that I spoke about earlier, US politics, the United States economy, our educational system and our educational outcomes, our criminal justice system, our faith and our religion, those things, we want to look at practically, how do we affect those? How do we make changes, sustainable changes, lasting changes, so that this gathering together hasn't just been about information, but it's also been able to equip us with things practically that we can do. And so first, I will start with US politics. And please feel free if you have, I'm gonna ask you if you have thoughts or questions or comments about what we should do with these things. So first off, what do we think of our political system in the United States? Local, state, federal. What are our first thoughts as we engage with these topics? And that's anybody virtually, people in the room. That'll start us off. Our politics, what are our initial thoughts about them?
Broken.
Hi, someone speaking on the virtual world, on the internet, on Zoom. Hi, did you have a question for Reverend Webb? Comment?
What? Are you talking to me?
Yeah, to whomever was.
Yeah, we were having issues with the sound. So if somebody was saying something, go ahead.
I just said I thought that the system was really broken. I mean, I can hardly talk to even people in my own family. You know, it's like the thing that one must avoid now, you know, don't talk about it. Don't bring it up. Don't say anything. Everybody's so defensive.
Yep, right, broken.
Everyone's got in their corner and they're not moving.
Mm-hmm. Debbie, go ahead.
I have become over the last 20 years increasingly disillusioned with the political party system. My concern is that it seems like looking at the major parties, okay, the Republican Democratic parties, their goal right now is to keep their power. and not serve the people. And this is I mean, for me to vote for somebody, a Republican or a Democrat, it doesn't matter. I want to vote for the person who's going to best serve, my region and national interests. And national interests are first, okay, before the state level and the local level. And that's just not, that's totally gone. And it's just extremely distressing. And the economics behind it, the political power, the emotional neediness, there's a lot there.
Good, thank you. Crystal?
I would say New Jersey, one of the things we might want to consider is changing the ballot layout, because we have a very antiquated ballot. A lot of states don't even use the type of ballots we use anymore, where you have that whole party line type of ballot, right? We need to get rid of that. And then two, this could hurt us for some of our good legislators, but I feel like the bad far outweigh the good, but we might want to consider term limits.
Okay, good, thank you. So I've heard broken, disillusioned, antiquated. What other words would we use to describe our political system, state, local, or federal?
I think that there's a bit of a disservice out there for labeling every Republican and every Democrat in a particular vein of light. You've got your true believers, you have your very practical people. I actually work for a true believer who's a Democrat. The thing is understanding the practicalities of the system. And if you're going to say, oh, not Democratic or not Republican, we need to come up with a viable alternative to that. So rather than just painting everyone with the, with the blue or red, I think that there is a need to see where the purple lies and see what our alternatives are and really learn where people are coming from. And yeah, it definitely takes effort, but connecting individually in that case.
Awesome, thank you. So what I did not hear was anyone to say that our political system is great, or it is to be replicated, it is to be shared. And that says we are in desperate need for a change. And so what I'm hoping to do with this portion, with this section, is to get some ideas about how do we go about changing those things. But first, I want to make note of three things that I think are what I call are the three detriments that hinder success no matter where you are or what you do. First one, ineffective communication. If I am not able to speak your language, if I'm not able to understand what you're saying, if I am not able to clearly articulate what I am trying to convince you of, I have no chance in changing your mind, changing legislation, or changing behaviors. So first, ineffective communication will derail any chances of success with any project, period. Number two, inaccurate assessment of value. We don't know the true value of people, places, or things, then we tend to overlook them and we miss what is important. I think that after the election of 2016, some people recognized that they misunderstood the value of going out and voting, because the country then went into a direction that, hey, some people liked it, but I think most people were felt like they were on a roller coaster without seatbelts or restraints. And so not recognizing the value of our voice, of our collective power, of our community, all of those things hinder us in the end. So that's first, ineffective communication. Second one, inaccurate assessment of value. And then the third one is insufficient investment. When we don't invest in the people, places, or things that are important, we cannot find success. And so when I'm encouraging people, when I'm coaching people, I tell them to apply those to their lives and see where you are lacking. Because if you have conflict in your life, if you have problems or challenges, one or more of those three are present. And so as we go through this discussion, allow us to be mindful that we want to communicate effectively, that we want to understand the value that other people are bringing, but then also that we want to invest in solutions so that we can all be moved forward. So political system, broken, disillusioned, antiquated. We fall into this thing called labeling. And I'll go back to the topic of my talk earlier. What do we do about it? What do we do about the broken system? It's be easy to fix, right? How can we fix it? Anybody jump in and help me out?
Well, I just want to say, I think it's always been broken. This whole idea that everything was fine, and then all of a sudden it started to fray. It was broken from day one. So when some people are 3/5 of a person, and only for purposes of evaluation, not for purposes any other sort of thing, that's a weak foundation to start. That's A. B, things are so bad now, and I'm thinking particularly about the privatized prison system. I was speaking with a friend the other day, and we were saying that maybe what should happen is cut out the private sector and then just have people assigned at random. So what would happen is really wealthy people wouldn't have a say over where they went to prison. It would just be random. And then I think the bottom would rise a little bit, because most of the situations, the living situations in prisons are inhumane.
Okay.
So that's one thought.
Thanks. Tom?
I wanted to express some of my experience from years ago, from a generation or so ago. Before I retired, I worked in government, and I often worked with legislatures, both in New Jersey and before that in Wyoming. And it's true that my own particular area of responsibility was not especially partisan. But what I found in both states, and this is again a generation ago, is that I was always able to sit down with the assembly person or the senator or a group of them and find areas of common action, of common potential. There was never a rigid kind of yes or no. And so my initial prescription, although I appreciate very much what Mona just said about it was never not broken, and certainly some of the examples she makes illustrate that point. And yet it didn't seem to me to be as broken as it is now. My point is, lower the walls. Find ways to sit together and trade off one program for another or one funding level for another. Find ways to compromise. And you're not going to win everything you want, but neither is your opponent going to win everything that that person wants. And that willingness to lower the walls, I think, is essential.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So that lowering the walls, finding areas to compromise, it seems so easy, right? This is low-hanging fruit, but it's so complex and difficult. But I guarantee you that if you were having a conversation with anybody, didn't know their color, didn't know their race, didn't know their background, you would find things that you could share and talk about, areas of common ground. And if we start with that, if we start with human, a friend of mine, Rabbi Mark Klein, says that we need to get back to human, right? We need to understand that it's not necessarily an opponent that I'm sitting across the table from, but it's someone who also has the same aspirations and ambitions that I do, but they just are seeing it from a different perspective. So let's keep that in mind. Yes, lowering the walls, compromise. Let's see what Sam has. He was unmuting himself earlier.
Samuel, Dr.
Samuel,
Webb.
I apologize.
That's quite okay. Another way of me answering that question is the fact that I usually ask myself, and this is a question with a group of folks here in Ohio. What keeps me up at night? I mean, and that it is not about my party, who I voted for. It's the things which I see. And one of the things right now that keep me up at night is COVID. I'll go quite. COVID keeps me up at night in the fact that we just don't know most times who is the person who is vaccinated, and that becomes a health question. And if I don't have my health, then I'm not here, So what keeps me up, what keeps me going, in accordance with what you had just said, is what is that commonality? And the commonality, it's my health. And if I don't have my health, there is nothing in which I have.
Thank you. I like what you said, what keeps me up at night, because I think that if we start our political conversations with that, you're not a Democrat or a Republican, you're not red or blue, you're not liberal or conservative, but you are someone who has concerns that keep you up at night. What are they? And let's put those on the table. And then we start our conversations from there, because most times there are some things that are going to keep you up at night that keep me up at night as well. And once we find that common ground, then we can start to move towards solution seeking. So once we found common ground, once we're collaborating, is it good enough for me just to vote? Or do I need more than just the vote? Donna?
I would like to add to answer your question and follow up on Sam. What keeps me up at night? COVID doesn't keep me up. I'm an operating room nurse. I've been wearing masks for 53 years, but universal health care and the fact that we are the only country, sort of civilized country, that doesn't have universal health care keeps me up. And the other thing is the electoral system. There is a wonderful group at the Cedar Lane. Actually, it's now the whole, it's a group around Washington and Maryland that science and religion. We don't talk about science and religion together, but 2 hours every Monday, we talk about something we listen to a presentation for an hour, and then we talk for an hour about it. Inevitably, we end up coming to other things that are going on in other countries and comparing different systems. And so things like, do we like the Scandinavian system better? Did we pay attention to the German election this year? Are there things in the world that we like better than the electoral system that does keep me up? I think ever since about 2014 and a half, I haven't slept because of the electoral system.
That's good. There are other examples, looking at other nations, other ways of being a society or an economy. There are those things. I just wonder, and this is a rhetorical question largely, I just wonder if Americans are either invested enough or committed enough to try to find something different. Because I think that any time that someone offers a new alternative, it's immediately shot down without even exploring or examining. Because I think that if people knew that America was the only developed nation that didn't provide healthcare or maternity leave, they would say that something is wrong with America. I think if people knew that the levels of income and wealth inequality were greatest in America, like the American exceptionalism tag that people put on this country, at first I was hesitant to use it, but I can use it now just in the negative though. We are exceptional in how bad we are, how terrible we treat each other. And so I think that we need to lean on our elected officials, our politicians, to actually change their way of being. But because people have made politics their career, it's hard to unseat them. And so we have to train a group of people, young people, middle-aged people, or even older people who hadn't been invested in that because they thought others were more capable. Maybe it's time for us to re-examine who should be leading our country, and the term limits and all of those things I think should be on the table, because just saying elect a Democrat this time or elect a Republican this time, I don't know that it's gonna be effective, because we've done that for years, decades even, and we have the same problems. All right, so we have to find common ground, lower the walls. We have to engage in conversations, find out what keeps people up at night, but then make the investment and the commitment and the changes, I think, that are necessary, whether that's you running for office yourself or petitioning to bring civics back into the schools, those types of things. We can do things in our homes, in our communities, in our churches, in our faith-based organizations that can be helpful. We just have to get out of our own way and realize that what we have is broken, antiquated, not working, and harmful. So that's politics. Next one is the economy. What do we think about our economy? I'm hearing chuckles. Wait, can we say not working though? Because there are some people who are benefiting tremendously, right?
What do we think about our economy?
You fill in the blank and then answer it.
What do I think about long-term structural possibilities?
Yeah, let's do that. What are the possibilities that we may have if we did work to change it?
Which way? I feel like we're close to divided. World War II, perhaps are larger. Been up on the generations that are economic, but there was a time for work a quote-unquote blue-collar job, nice house. If in fact that's the American dream. And now I know situations where everyone in the family is working and a kid wants to go to school, college, or further education, and they still can't afford it.
Yeah.
So something is already giving. The fact that people are talking about loan forgiveness, which I always say there never should have been loans to begin with, but.
Okay. I saw Tom was getting up. Yeah.
There actually is a reasonably good parallel in American history to where we are now. And it's the so-called Gilded Age of the late 19th century. 1875 to 1900 kind of period of time, where industrialists, the men, almost entirely men, who controlled the railroads, who controlled the steel industry, who controlled this and that and the other major element of the economy, were kings, were unbelievably wealthy. And the working people, including non-white people, including recent immigrants and African Americans, but also white tenant farmers and so on. They were scraping by or not, just barely trying to find a little way out of what, 12-hour working days and 60-hour weeks, 70-hour weeks, that kind of thing. And what followed the so-called Gilded Age was a series of progressive reforms. Now, let me hasten to say it didn't affect everybody. It absolutely didn't affect and didn't help African Americans. And I know I could find other groups that were overlooked as well. But the economy as a whole evened out some, not enough, not for everybody, but some. And those progressive reforms were later, skip over a decade or two, followed by the New Deal. Again, very little help to African Americans, maybe some, not much, but things like Social Security, wage and hour laws, the much better use of labor organizations, unions, which started to get quite a lot of authority to negotiate contracts. So there was progress and there was less inequality. Again, it's not like that was a golden age. It's not like everybody benefited, but some people did. And I'm hoping that this modern Gilded Age can be succeeded by progressive reforms.
Thank you. I love that. I love the fact that you brought up the Gilded Age because it does draw striking parallels. And even if the changes, the reforms didn't impact everybody, didn't lift everybody like we would hope that they would have, that gives us sort of like an outline of what does work, because those progressive policies that came afterwards, they did start to make a difference, and they can show us that, hey, you know what, we have been here, and the thing that happened right after the Gilded Age, the Great Depression. And so, yeah, there's another comment right here, but then I want to say something about the way that we hold our economy up as the greatest thing in the on the face of the earth, even though the economy crashes every 10 years or so, right? So please share with me your thoughts.
So how do we address the economy? And in a way that is just so along with how do we address racism? So I was interested recently to complete reading Ywca Kendi's Stamped from the Beginning. And I was really eager to see what things he would come to at the end. And I found kind of a similar strain in Jelani Cobb's article about Derek Bell, I think in a recent New Yorker. But anyhow, both of them seem to come to the same kind of direction. And it is that the things got better and in the ways that Ted just mentioned at certain points in history. And maybe they even were intended to get better, although those weren't so much. But for example, Brown versus Board of Education was intended for things to get better, but it didn't so much because it advantaged more white people than persons of color. And so with the other things that that Ted just mentioned, advantaged white people rather than people of color. And so what was kind of happening in both of those things were the two authors were saying there's this like 1/10 of 100th of 1% who are advantaged by the economic system as it is. And other folks think that they are supposed to be advantaged by it. And they're completely wrong and absolutely need to change our thinking so that we know that we are in community with people of color and with other marginalized groups, and not with those people that folks aspire to somewhere up in the stratosphere.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's the interesting part. And this sort of ties into politics as well, because politicians are able to weave narratives in such a way that people believe what they say, even without the evidence of it, even without any hint or movement or change in direction. People believe what a charismatic and well-spoken elected official has to say. The truth is, though, that if you look at statistics, if you pay attention, in the 70s, I think, is when Ronald Reagan implemented his trickle-down economic policy, saying that, hey, if we give more money to job creators, then it's gonna flow down. And we've been waiting on the trickle for 35 years. And so to me, it seems simple enough to say, hey, if we've tried this thing for a while and it has not worked as described, as intended, then we just do the opposite thing. So if cutting taxes for certain people did not create the jobs, then let's raise them back up, because after the Gilded Age, after the Great Depression, when tax rates were higher on the highest income, that's when the country, all levels, experienced some form of growth and some form of uplift in their systems. One thing that comes to mind as I'm thinking about this in the economy, Timothy Thomas Fortune, who was a civil rights activist, he was a publisher, he was I call him a social agitator, and someone who was calling people to account back in the late 1800s. In one of his writings, the book called Black and White, Land, Labor, and Politics, there's a line in there that I think is appropriate, if not shocking. He said, the poor and the middle class pay all of the taxes in a country because of the concentrated wealth and it has something also to do with the land, right? And so that's sort of what we see in cities as they gentrify and as they change. The concentration of wealth goes to one group of people who, when you pair it out, they don't pay the amount of taxes relative to the income that they have or relative to the wealth that they have that others do. And so for me, it seems that while both Democrats and Republicans seem to be okay with ending or curtailing or limiting entitlements, corporate entitlements, they're fine with. Corporate bailouts, corporate welfare, it's fine. They don't see that as spending, right? Cutting taxes, reducing the amount of money you bring in, they somehow say that that's going to create more income. So I think people whose brains aren't connected in a way to where they say less money equals more, I don't think they are qualified to hold office particularly. So that goes back to number one, politics. So that's politics, that's the economy. Oh, go ahead, Samuel.
Yeah, I have a thought about the economy, because for me, as what the previous commentator had said, is the fact that how could we talk about the economy without speaking about the economic injustice? So there's a book out there which is called The Color of Money. And The Color of Money really helps you to understand not just what the wealth gap is, but it helps you to understand that the various ways as to how we put that the emphasis on money, or it's the kind of patterns to the ways as to how we think about money. I mean, and therefore, how is it that we could solve this economic injustice in which we have? I mean, there's people who don't have jobs. Of course, if you don't have jobs, that means that you're housing, that means you're schooling, that means I mean, there is such a trickle down effect, and if I could say that, because of that injustice in which is there. So the economy, sometimes it's not the way as to what we're thinking what this economy is, because again, when we look at COVID, what is it that COVID have really have shown? COVID have brightly shown us where these disparities are. So in speaking about the economy, I think it really have to be not just founded on this is as we look back in the past, and therefore is yes, things in the past do have some relevance, but if we cannot speak about the injustice, even back in the past, even within the days of the Depression itself, I mean, back then, that form of injustice was also very prevalent. So how do we speak about the economy and don't put all these things around that?
That is a great question. And I'll respond by saying this. Asking the question, what is the economy? Right? Because I think that when sometimes we use terms in such a way that most people have an idea of what they mean or what they think you mean by it, but they really don't know, right? So I think about when people are saying the economy is doing great, the stock market is is at record numbers. It's not the economy. That's a measure of the wealth of those who have invested in that stock market. But the economy, the system, the economic system of the nation is much more than that. And as we've seen in the last few years, the number and the stock market has nothing necessarily to do with the fundamentals on the ground. And so, Samuel, you're absolutely right. Understanding what we mean by the economy, pairing out or parsing out those differences and understanding that we have a service-based economy, right? And you brought up COVID and said that it laid bare the differences. A service-based economy, which means that we have a consumption-driven economy. People are encouraged to spend, not save, not invest, but to spend. And so when the spending dries up because my pockets are empty or because the stores are closed or because there are millions dying every day because of the disease, I'm not going out to spend and your economy stops. It's interesting to me how quickly politicians move to give businesses money though, once customers couldn't come. Like they can't do that when it's a mother and children on the street because they don't have a home. No, that would be socialism. But when it's businesses, it's all good because, hey, businesses run the country. So with our economy, understanding what it is, but also I would say better money management habits on our part and better investment decisions, right? Our economy is a backwards looking economy. We're still the leading producer in fossil fuels and gas, and those types of things. And so what happens when we look forward to the new and disruptive trends that are coming? What happens when we train our people to be ready for those jobs, right? It then becomes an opportunity for us to get beyond because the need is there, but if you don't have the labor force that is able, then there will always be these disparities. So we have to stop waiting, I think, for those who are benefited by the system to change the system. And those who know different or seen different, have studied different systems, they begin to start implementing or testing or experimenting with new and different ways of being for us as a country. Education. What do we do? Are we educating our children? Do we feel like our educational system is the best in the world? It's certainly one of the most expensive ones in the world. Say again?
It's so unequal.
Unequal, yes. And education for me, education is the way out, is the way to change generational paradigms. And here's why I'll say that. Some people would say that the best way out of poverty or the best way to build wealth is home ownership. While for some people that may be true, I don't think for people who've been disadvantaged or marginalized or disinvested in, I don't think the right way to do that is to put them in homes. Because we can see in the Great Recession that a lot of people were chasing the dream of home ownership and then they had it taken right out from under them because of predatory lending practices and those things. But if you control what people think and how they operate, you can control their lives. And so for me, education says, let's take that back. What are the things that we need to learn? What are the things that we need to know to grow and thrive, to be harmonious and productive people? And then how do we make sure that students get that, whether they're in a school building or at home, whether they're at their faith community or in a park? How do we educate? What is the purpose of education? Oh, yeah, what's that answer? What is the purpose of education? Because the way the United States has done it has been to indoctrinate. No thoughts? Oh, we have some. All right.
I just want to share this. I taught in a school one time, and it got a little bit of attention. It was small and had some innovative programs. And the principal, in responding to a journalist, said, and it was a school for girls, our goal is for each girl to know who she is and be glad. Okay. That's good. I think identity has a lot to do with how we grow people up
I'll speak for myself. There was a time in my life where I did not know who I was, and I wasn't confident in who I was, and so therefore I was subject to trying to fit into what other people wanted. But I think when someone asked me that question, what is the purpose of education? My response was a little bit different. I'll wait because Reverend Carol might have, no? Okay, so my response was, it is to teach people to think. The purpose of education is to teach people to think, to solve problems. And when we do that or teach them who they are and they become confident in themselves, they will find the ways to solve the problems and not be easily led around. I think too often in our emotionally charged worlds, we have people who are led by emotion and not reason. And so teaching people how to think through those things is an important step. Reverend Carol.
I'm going right where you're going. You scared me a little bit when you said, when you teach people, then you can control how they are. And my response was more like what you just said. I think the goal of education is to teach people enough facts that they can manage and enough confidence in their learning that they can ask questions and not just accept what's told.
Wow. I can't believe I forgot that. You said something that just triggered this. The most important and I think the most dangerous question that people can ask is why? What is your why? Why are our systems the way they are? Why do we allow certain things the way that we do? And so I think I'll wrap up because we're at time. For all of these things, politics, education, criminal justice, faith and religion, the economy, ask yourself the question, why is it this way? Who is it benefiting? And what can be done to change it? And then beginning to engage with those policymakers, those activists, those advocates, anybody you can to carry that message forward that, hey, this is a problem that we need to change. It's almost like one of the indicator lights in your car, the warning lights, right? You'll have a amber or a yellow light on that says, hey, check this out. And then if you ignore it long enough, it becomes red. And if you ignore it long enough, the car stops. The way that we break the system is to ask the question, why are we doing it this way? And then offering an alternative way for us to be doing it. I want to thank you for listening. And there's so much more that we can get to. Our organizations are also ways that we can change. I'm with the Red Bank Area NAACP, the New Jersey Social Justice Remembrance Coalition, and also the Second Baptist Church of Asbury Park. Use all of your tools and resources to be the change that you want to see in the world because we are waiting on you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Reverend Welch. Thank you very much. We are going to take a 15-minute break and we will be back with another workshop panel. Thank you.
Hi, Mona.
Hey, how are you, Reverend?
Oh,
I have to finish my session with you. But not here, but soon.
that's right. That's right.
How have you been?
I'm good. I'm enjoying this. I mean, this is fabulous.
It is.
Fabulous.
Making me feel overwhelmed, though.
Indeed.
Didn't think we were taking a break now.
Oh, I thought we were taking a break. Well,
I'm looking at the schedule. It says not. It says just get going. But on the other hand, it's an hour and a quarter for this session.
of public policy, that is to have their governing body pass a resolution that not only says that they understand that racism is a public health crisis, but to take implementable actions, to make statements, to state a resolution that therefore we will do this, we will do this. So that was kind of my start in moving into this. I'm going to just let Ted take a second to say how that seemed to you as we got that started.
Making the connection between racism and public health took a couple of beats for me. It wasn't immediate. Well, yes, I certainly knew about differential health outcomes between whites and African Americans, or among other racial and ethnic groups. But the connection that says the existence of racism itself is a crisis in public health, again, took me a little bit of reflection to get to. And you've already done some of that reflection with the earlier program this afternoon with Crystal, but we can go quickly over how our group in Princeton and around the neighboring municipalities of Princeton have taken that step. But most of what we're going to do this afternoon, I think, is going to be to follow through some PowerPoint slides and initially start with showing how that step is a natural step to take, and then say, okay, what does it mean for something we can do, and why are local governments a critical part of this? And I think we're going to try to show that to you. Carol?
So great. And now let's go back and start that. And teacher that I am, and also a very visual print learner, I like to see things clearly in front of me. So I've tried to help us put together these slides so that we can see exactly what Ted was saying, that racism is, and also what can I do. So we can look at the fact that first of all, what do we mean when we say public health? And one of our core group who is very involved in public health looked to her national organization for their definition that public health is that which promotes the health of people in communities where they live, they learn, they work, they play. And so let
me just quickly say, APHA is the acronym for American Public Health Association.
Right, and they're one of the organizations that we can look to for some good guidance in this whole process. And because they reach across the country, and because there are other organizations, which we'll mention later, that reach across the country that have engaged in seeking to get their municipalities to have this resolution, it's something that no matter where you live, you can find out, is it happening in your community? And if so, how can we monitor the implementation of it? Is it not yet in your community or your municipality or other governing entity? How can we pull a team together and figure out how to make that happen? So, but moving to what is a crisis, a public health crisis? Well, it has three elements according to APHA, that it affects large numbers of people, that it endures over a long period of time. And this is helpful for me to hear because sometimes people hear the word crisis and they think, oh, that's just something that happens in the moment. But this crisis is something that has been building, building, building. And so it continues to be a crisis that affects and hurts people and requires a large scale solution. Hopefully we can be a part of, and hopefully we can invite you, no matter where you happen to be joining in with us today, to consider being a part of this. And and some of the conditions, and we heard some of these before, and so I'll just mention some of the things that really make it clear that it's a public health crisis. And, okay. Oh dear, and so I can actually, I'm a little bit blinded by the light, so if you want to
Shall
go
I
through
do the
this slide, yeah.
clicking?
No, actually, go ahead and.
Oh, the
and read that.
history of racial discrimination, housing disparities, environmental racism, that is where marginalized people are located physically, disparate treatment by health professionals, disparate nutrition opportunities,
And we heard a lot about that from Crystal.
and disparate educational opportunities. Again, these are the systemic conditions that have negatively impacted the health of people based on race. One more, I guess. Limited access to quality health care. Obviously, a lot of that is economic. And insurance coverage is often lacking or limited.
And again, that was so clearly laid out by Crystal. Okay, let's look at the next one. I'm sure that it's going to be small enough print that I will get some help. Thank you. So here we're looking at just some statistics about the harmful conditions and the impacts of Black Americans in comparison with white Americans. And this actually came from the APHA. So help me out here because.
Blacks have much higher risk, 40% greater risk of high blood pressure than whites. You know, group A versus group B, we're talking millions of people in that comparison. Blacks have more than double the risk, 2.1 times the risk for developing diabetes than whites, and Mexican Americans, 2.0 the risk. Blacks have a high rate of obesity, affecting 37% of African Americans, according to that particular statistic. 60% of Blacks are living with a chronic disease. Infant mortality among African Americans is twice that of whites, and 9% of Native Americans are living with untreated asthma. There are many, many more statistical points that make that same point of this very, very much differential outcome in health according to racial differences.
And I think that Crystal made even stronger statements about maternal health and the rates of childbirth in difficulty in childbirth. And I would also say, just heard within the last 24 hours, some statements about the effects of the wildfires on the West Coast, having higher rates of pollution across the country. And it made me immediately think, who's going to feel that? It's those folks who are already subject to higher rates of asthma, and it will, I'm certain, exacerbate that.
And don't have quality of health care that is as high and might not be insured and so on like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So what are we going to do? What can we do to make a difference? And I'll pop us forward with this one for a couple moments. I think that.
Please.
Maybe not. It's all there. Help me out. Honest to goodness, my vision isn't as wonderful as I would like it to be.
Well, do you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead and read the, or make sure.
I'm not going to quite read it because
I know.
You
Just
can read it.
Pick it up.
But the point is, one of the ways we can make a difference is to go to local governments. In New Jersey, to the municipal governments. Why? Because we'd be urging them to pass a resolution, and in that resolution, the municipality would be committing itself to taking certain actions. First is look at themselves, to assess their policies and procedures and review new ordinances through a racial equity lens. Let's say we're doing zoning as an example. What's the racial equity lens that we look at our zoning practices by? Second, to commit to conduct human resources and vendor selection with a racial equity lens. Who are the contractors we're hiring? Who are the employees that we're hiring? And then third, to identify clear goals and benchmarks that will assess the progress in whatever it is that the municipality is promising to study and reflect on. If it is housing, for example, what's the progress we're making? And zoning, what's the progress we're making? If it's hiring, what's the progress we're making in that area? So a municipal resolution can look at those municipal actions such as reviewing ordinances, conducting human resources and vendor selection, and clear goals in making progress.
And since we're talking about health in this case, municipalities might look particularly at what are the health facilities that are in their, within their boundaries, and consider what kind of inspections, what kind of standards they should be held to. So we're kind of constantly on the lookout for what are elements, and there are a lot more actually in the resolution that we use as our model, and in other resolutions that you can find on some websites such as the American Public Health Association, and Salud America is one very valuable website that has taken on this particular project. So they have sample resolutions from other places. But for example, some of you may recall that I asked a question this morning of our speaker speaking to the effects of incarceration and that marvelous project that he described of engaging people within the carceral system. But my question was, and what about when they're moving out and when they move into communities? Are there some clear actions that municipalities can take in terms of policy that would enable those persons to be welcome to integrate their life back into the community? So I have a sense that there's probably many different things that could be brought up that could be asked of a council or township committee or whatever the governing body is to say, yes, we commit to doing this, and we will set goals so that we will be able to see if we're working toward racial equity and beyond the racial crisis that we now have. So we believe that we can make a difference. And you know, the way I've thought about it is, if every community were doing this and doing the education that corresponds to it, so that their community members know this is why we are creating this policy, and we want you to participate in carrying out these policies. I think we could move toward being an anti-racist society.
This program has a large number of possible areas of focus. Let me just mention two, for example. One of them is the availability of nutritious food. We heard more about that earlier this afternoon. But if parts of a particular municipality are in a so-called food desert, if the only local place to get food is a place where you can get fast food and sticky buns and not good nutritious food, well, then there's a zoning opportunity to create an area for a supermarket or at least a farmer's stand that would bring produce, fresh produce, maybe more nutritious food to that area of town. It's a zoning issue. Another possibility is clean water. We know that there are lots of lead pipes in our municipal water supplies. It's very often true that those pipes that should be replaced, put modern pipes in, are going to be in the parts of the town where marginalized people live. And so let's look at where the problems are, if it's access to food, if it's lead in the water, if it's anything else that it might be. Availability of public transportation so that somebody can get to their physician's appointment. Then those are the kinds of things that could be put into a municipal resolution and have the town track the progress step by step, setting goals and making progress.
Thank you. And yeah, those are all such important specifics that could happen. This particular slide just tells what we in our initiative are hoping to do. And I'll just say again that we are a collaborative of the Unitarian Universalist congregations group and the Bayard Rustin for Social Justice. So what I would hope that people would be motivated to do or think of doing is look at your own congregation and possibly from like-minded organizations in your area and work to generate a team. If you're in, especially if you're in central New Jersey, if you're in New Jersey, please come back to us and we'll give you a contact a little bit further down. And beyond that, you're welcome to check with us to see how, how we're progressing towards these kind of lofty goals that we set for ourselves to move the whole idea forward. But it does mean getting concrete people in concrete places to say, yes, we believe in this, we think this can make a difference, and we're going to be a team to do it. And one other thing, I'm not quite sure whether it pops up here or in a further slide, but a really important step that we feel as we move into the team. And I'm going to confess that most of us on our core team are white people. And so an important thing in creating a team in any municipality is, of course, to find the stakeholders, to really engage those stakeholders in being a part of the team that's going to take a resolution to their town council, to their governing body. So as you can see, we set some goals for ourselves, and that would be what every team would need to do. And so maybe this is a good time to just say, tell us about a specific local team, Ted, because you're helping to make one of those happen.
My wife and I live in Lawrence Township, which is the town in New Jersey between Princeton and Trenton. And Princeton passed a resolution a little bit more than a year ago. Lawrence Township has not yet passed a resolution. But we think we can get a resolution saying racism is a public health crisis in Lawrence. Here are the 3 or 4 or 5 things that we, the town government of Lawrence, promised to do. In order to find out what those 3 or 4 or 5 things are, is it access to nutritious food? Is it public transportation? Is it zoning? Is it whatever it might be? We are reaching out and talking to the constituencies in Lawrence Township that are much more likely than I am as a white person to be affected by these different quality of outcomes. Where are the people who will tell us what their impact is, what their needs are, whatever it might be? And so we're at the stage right now, while New Jersey is going through local elections for the next month, we're talking with interest groups, community groups in Lawrence to say, what affects you in terms of having an impact on your health? What housing issues, what educational issues, what access to food or any other kinds of issues are there? And then whatever we find, we're going to take to the local members of the town council, which I think is where we're going in the next slide.
All right. Here we go.
One more
So this just gives you an idea
Premature
of
thing.
where things have been moved forward in New Jersey and are definitely at the point where monitoring is important for those three municipalities in New Jersey. I learned when I saw the Salud America website that things were robust in Ohio. And I think our speaker from Ohio earlier kind of shared that there are some good things going on from his location, Akron. But I knew that Cleveland, my hometown, so to speak, and Columbus were going strong, and Dayton, Ohio also. And a Congress member from Ohio was mentioned, but Senator Sherrod Brown from Ohio in the U.S. Senate is aware of this resolution and is looking for the time and the ways to bring that forward in the U.S. Senate. So yeah, that would be interesting to see what the implementable kinds of things are that that the U.S. Senate would take. And so be ready for that one. And also don't be discouraged at the idea of taking it to your higher levels wherever you may live, whether it's your county, maybe that's a place to ask for implementation of some realization that racism is a public health crisis. In some cases, to ask the state to pass the resolution and to pass some statements that ensure that they're going to deal with that. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to point out that on this slide, you see the website for Salud America, SALUD-America.org. That Salud America website has a great deal of information that both substantively connects the existence of systemic racism with the impact on public health and talks about local campaigns throughout the United States to pass these kinds of resolutions. That Salud America website is very, very good.
And the other organization that I want to give some credit to is the Ywca, who's always had, for a long time, has had the marker that appears on all the envelopes that I get from them that say, eliminating racism, empowering women. And they believe in that, and they take steps to work on that. So one of the steps that they have taken is they had a very good, I think they've had more than one webinar, probably can be found on their website. And we heard a lot of very practical kinds of things that people can do in that particular webinar. So this is where it's really moving around, and we would love to make New Jersey, for those of you who are in New Jersey, be a very strong kind of spot that just kind of flames forward and shines forward as an important group for taking this step. But as I say, wherever you are, this can be done. So, oops, don't want to do that. So let us, okay, here's a kind of a critical thing. Again, what individuals and groups can do. And as you see there in the second bullet, there's a form that we have used to gather names of people who are interested or want information. So we would clearly suggest that you do that bit.ly.brcsj survey. And it's not so much a survey, it's just a way to give us your contact information so that we can keep in touch with you as new resources develop. We do keep a little bit of a collection of resources, and you can also share resources with us. What I would like to do is be able to get back to people, and I haven't perfected it in this presentation, but we do have a good brochure that that gives an overview of this whole project, and we do have access to some sample resolutions. So I'm going to work on ways that I can get those back out to people, and one of them may be to get your name on, maybe the best one is to get your name and your contact information on that survey. And whoever has that, then we will definitely send out these further specific bits of information.
The action step that we are coming up to is approaching your local government and encouraging that government to pass this kind of resolution. And it could be, what, formidable or uncomfortable. for some of you who have never worked with government before, to approach your legislator, your council person. That's why we're a team, because a lot of us have done that kind of work, and we can help you do it. We can team you up with someone who has done it in the past. We can encourage some tips and some ways to get to know the local government representative, council person, whatever title they have, mayor, whatever title it might be in a particular municipality, and work together to pass resolutions town by town by town.
And so, tell me what the first thing is there.
Together with your team, this is ways to have a local impact. Together with your team, explore community experience and needs.
Right, okay.
We
So
talked about that a little bit with what my group is doing, our group is doing in Lawrence Township.
And find the stakeholders. And yeah, you want to know that whatever resolution passes, it's going to really tap into those things that people need to do in order to eliminate racism as a public health crisis.
Review and modify as needed a proposed resolution, including implementation and accountability. I think that just means look and see what other towns have done, make the modifications that come out of your own conversations with the stakeholders in your town, and then make sure that they have implementation steps in them. You know, a percentage step-by-step increase with an annual report by the town officials or whatever it might be.
So whatever your kind of lead team is that's helping this happen, just make sure that you have developed ways to monitor. Yeah, okay, where are we gonna go?
Attend municipal meetings to become familiar with personnel and processes. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, sure, and sometimes that's pretty easy if you talk to your borough or town clerk just to find out, are they still on Zoom or are they going to be in person? And so if you've got and this is why we need to create teams to do this. You got some people that say it happens on the first and third Monday of every month and know that that's a day that they can be there and start to get the feel for how are people responding to different kind of issues. Are they cognizant of the needs in the community? And that'll be a little guide for when you're actually going to have it introduced as a resolution. And there's some specific things that you will want to talk over with probably the clerk in your town, so that you know how many days in advance things have to be publicized and all that kind of thing.
And the next point says, connect with local officials and test the waters for receptivity. In other words, talk to the members of the local council, find out what they think has some chance of acceptance.
And use all of the tips that have been given over the past couple of hours of find the common thing that is going to be a place to start with. We all care about our health and being healthy and letting our children be healthy, and take it from there.
Speak up and speak out to friends and neighbors, to the press, on social media, and when you can, in municipal meetings.
So, right, I think the more a municipality becomes educated about this, and here again, we can help, and there are some very good resources that we can make available to you to modify as needed for letters to the editor, to see what's going to be good on your social media. And it, if it gets to be something that people are seeing and hearing regularly and starting to talk to their neighbors about, we can make this happen.
And then plan your strategy for passing the resolution and tracking the implementation.
So yeah, don't go in without having a good plan for the follow-up. Yeah. And so what are we coming to next? Okay.
All right. Use the Google. This says getting involved. How are we going to get this started in your town? First, we encourage you to sign up on that bit.ly form so that you're in touch with the rest of the project, with what we call the core team that Carol and I are part of, and tracking your progress, helping you with things that other town teams are doing. We will contact you with any assistance you may need. Share your enthusiasm to this work with everyone, and we'll move forward together from here.
And so having, for example, a shared drive, a Google shared drive or whatever other system you use to share information, be sure that, that the people who are trying to make this happen have good access to information. And we're all going to learn some things. You know, I say all the time, I need to learn Google as a second language because it's not my first language. And so, yeah, if we can use those social media tools and other things, that's great. But you know what? The most effective thing that's going to make a difference is people talking to people. So don't discount the possibility of using this as one of the ways that you can bring up our needs for social justice, our needs for becoming an anti-racist society. Public health just itself is such a basic thing for all of us that how important to just start a conversation and help move it forward. And here's some other just kind of final steps.
Further steps, I'll quickly go through these. Stay connected with your local team. Be alert when other resources become available. Document what you're doing. The actual words here, say that 3 times. Document, document,
Right.
document.
The whole thing when we're organizing, document. And I guess as they say, when I was an EMT, they said, if you don't document, it didn't happen. So that's just a word to the organizer in you.
Celebrate your victories and keep the community apprised of what's going on and of help that you need. Welcome new people to come in and work with you. Revise your implementation plan, of course, because it's not going to work out the way you thought it would when you're halfway through. You'll find that you have to add or change something. And then keep this cycle going till racism is no longer the public health crisis that it is today. You want to add to that?
This is something that took us hundreds of years to get into, as was stated earlier today. We can make a step forward. We need to be committed to take a step forward. It is a part of being a human being. It is a part of being in our faith community, in our social justice communities. And again, this is a team thing. No one of us can to take this step by ourselves. Find the joy in it too. There's going to be joy. There's going to be people to meet. There's going to be good things to make happen.
And this just says, thank you for your interest and commitment. I think the possibilities here are significant. If we get more and more towns to be more and more attentive to how their ongoing work does have a public health impact that is particularly different for racial groups where marginalized people are negatively affected by this or that or the next policy.
And before we take questions, the last thing about celebrate your work and make it known. It is kind of a call back to our core team to perhaps be sure that we have a website, something that that everybody who does this, especially those in New Jersey, so that we can say, these are the towns that have already taken this on. And then that becomes a talking point when you want to influence folks to get on board with this and make it happen.
What questions are there?
Yes.
Debbie has a question.
Oh dear, I'm hoping you can read it.
I can't read it. Are you familiar with?
Are you
Say it
familiar with
again, Debbie, or say it out loud?
Creative New Jersey? It's an organization that has to be invited in to a community and has to show interest in a broad sector of the community. Business, government, organizations, community groups, etc. And what they do, this is similar to what you're proposing here in terms of forming the team. But what they do is they get the community together and brainstorm. Okay, how do we improve our community? What is it? What are we facing? What are our concerns? And similar to what I forget his Reverend
Webb?
Wells, yes, was saying, is that you need to have actionable steps. The steps may be as simple as cleaning up the park once a week, or something really very basic. But the community decides, and they commit to taking action. So if somebody wants to clean up the park and nobody volunteers to lead that group, it doesn't happen, But their focus is very much on community, building that sense of community, and communities taking responsibility, for their own, improvement. And so what you're describing would fit together with what they are doing. And it just seems like there's might be a synergy there.
I don't
could
know
be very
the
helpful.
Creative New Jersey organization, but I'm happy to look it up. Thank you, Debbie.
I'm happy to introduce you to Elizabeth Murphy, who's the director, and it's one of my favorite organizations. So because they're so community oriented. I'll be happy to send that to you, Ted.
That's really wonderful. And I appreciate that question. And I'm just wondering, if I say my email, are folks at the controls there able to throw it up? Is that a yes? Okay, so I'm going to say it because it's not my name in this particular case. It's outreach.brcsj, as in Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice, brcsj@gmail.com. I just want everybody to be able to get back to us that way, as well as, and we really are glad if you put your information into that form, that bit.ly form.
Other questions, other observations about this proposal?
I don't know if this is a question or an observation, but it's what hit my brain a few moments ago. At the beginning of the morning, Andrea McChristian talked about reparations and made the distinction that reparations aren't necessarily writing a check, but reforming the system. And I wondered if you thought this work of racism as a public health crisis and the efforts to deal with it might be considered a part of reparations.
I would like to say thank you for bringing that forward to us and making the connection between that speaker this morning and our work. Yes, I would. It really motivates me to be get back together with people who are really working hard on the reparations idea and seeing what kind of alignment we could make between those two efforts, because just as the creating the resolution and deciding what things are going to be manageable and doable and are almost imperative for a community to do, this could be a part of the imperative of the reparations
Program or campaign?
Yes, yeah.
And my reaction is positive as well. If we accept her premise that reparations is a broader program than financial recompense for injustice, then yes, the kinds of program, attention, commitment that we're talking about definitely is part of that broader understanding of reparations. There's just no question.
And do we have other questions, especially those out in the virtual world? Or anybody else right here with us?
I would like to hope that as campaigns get underway in one town, then the neighboring town can pick up the ball. Then the next county over will hear about it and they'll start a similar program. And it can grow kind of naturally throughout New Jersey, even beyond New Jersey into other parts of the country, as the Salud America website shows. This idea of focusing local government on tracking and monitoring particular policies so that the public health impact is lessened. This idea does have a lot of support around the country, and we hope it does in New Jersey.
And certainly a next step is to move it into state houses, so that everything that goes through in terms of legislation is reviewed with a racial justice lens and with the idea of what is the impact on the health of the entire community. So we've got big work to do, and I'm really thrilled that we were able to get some things started here. And just hope that that folks will want to pick this up, and we'll be so happy to give you some help and some resources and some mutual encouragement. That is what we need. And so I'm happy for more questions if you have any.
I just have one other thought. You named 3 towns or cities in New Jersey that have passed such a resolution. And Ted, I know you're working in Lawrenceville. Are there any other emerging towns that are, they're emerging into the process that you know of?
The ones we know of are the ones connected with the congregation. And yes, Carol can list a few.
West Windsor, we're having some conversations with some people there. Hamilton, kind of slow start with some conversations. And I would also say, I have some contacts in South Brunswick who are very interested in putting this forward further.
Wonderful.
And let me say, this is not at all a Unitarian Universalist program. There's no reason at all not to partner with other congregations in a town, other faith congregations in a town, or with local NAACPs, local community organizations, self-help kind of organizations. All of these possibilities exist to build the teams.
It's exciting to know that it's germinating in more than one place right now.
Yes.
And the more people hear about it, the better.
That's right.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't need to be limited only to working with municipalities, although that is a way of gaining more public awareness. But the other thing I would say is let's move it to organizations, ones that we've thought about. I have worked with, I'm a representative on the Mercer County Youth Services Commission. A skillion different agencies in Mercer County come to those meetings, and we have put out the idea for them to do it within their agency or within an organization that they're working with, as well as taking it to towns. Right now, we're kind of focused on the town. Looks like we have another question.
That be me?
Yes.
Oh, is that in-house or is that me?
No, I think it's you, Donna.
Oh, okay. Actually, your comment just now about interfaith activities really has made me think that, well, I've recently been thinking that there are so many things that could be addressed in interfaith ways that really might create inroads that we don't know exist. You know, for a lot of people, Unitarian Universalism is a cult. And unless they get to know us better, they're not necessarily going to think that there are things that we could collaborate on. And a perfect example, I kind of knew what interfaith power and light was from some contacts in Washington. And I knew that the synagogue where I sang and a couple of other churches and we're working on reducing energy bills by negotiating together. And they've been, not only have been they've been very successful, but in my recent move to Iowa, the Iowa City Church was in the middle of downtown, not accessible, has in the last couple of years built a new building outside of Iowa City that is probably the greenest building in Iowa, certainly the greenest church. And it was highlighted in this week's meeting of interfaith power and light. They concentrated on an Episcopal church and this UU church in Iowa about how green can you get? How much energy can you give back to the grid? And so I've been thinking a lot about interfaith opportunities to address bigger issues, especially like healthcare. And so I just wanted to throw that interfaith word out there for more congregations to think about.
I'm glad you emphasized it because I think you're absolutely right. The opportunity to work with other faith groups on a program like this is just natural and normal. In the one that I'm most involved in our own town, there are a couple of Presbyterians who are working with us, and they're doing a great job. They're doing at least as well as the Unitarian Universalists are on this program. The interfaith possibility is enormous here, yes.
I would certainly concur. What a natural thing, and what just a beautiful thing to put your energies together with that, and to follow on the directive that we heard earlier of listen, 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 and then go for it and come back to us and ask us if we can help you with resources. We'll do absolutely the best we can. I mean, you're going to find some too.
And of course, there are opportunities to work with African-American congregations, AME congregations, and so on here. And the partnerships that are possible there just develop and develop and develop. So the opportunity is great.
So
I must say, my Iowa dream, you know, the original Iowa City building still exists, and it's not occupied and it's not being used. And the developer who bought the land, because the building is a historic building, as long as they said they were going to preserve the building, they got the land at a much reduced cost. My dream would be to start an interfaith center in the old Iowa City Universalist Church.
That sounds just wonderful. I
So
wish
that's
every good thing.
when I can't sleep because of the other stuff, then I can go to sleep thinking about that, the future for that building.
Good for you. Thank you.
Keep us surprised. We're interested to know. Yeah. So, I thank you for every input that folks in our listening audience shared with us, and thanks, Ted, for
Thank
doing
you,
this.
Carol. Thank you
together.
to Murray Grove for the
Thank
opportunity to present this. We're very
you.
glad to have been here.
Thank you, Ted and Carol. And we look forward to keeping in touch with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, good. Like any other ways that you know of that we can spread this is welcome. Thanks.
You okay? You want to?
I am happy to have.
Our next and final workshop today. We have been crossing the broad expanse of all of the issues today, and we're going to finish tonight by going from Z to A. The presenters are Zoe Lafler and her friend Adrian. No, I did it wrong. Oh, sugar. I wrote it down wrong. It's Adrian and Abigail, and they are members of the UU Faith Action Youth Group, and they've made a presentation, a taped presentation, and they are online now to answer questions and be with us. So I give you the voices of tomorrow, people who are young people who are as excited in and interested and committed to racial justice as anyone I know. And Abigail and Zoe, or Zoe and Abigail, we look forward to hearing from you.
Good evening. My name is Zoe Lafler, one of the co-leaders of UU Faith Action's youth-led group, Fair, Faith Action Inclusivity Representatives. We are an interfaith group of youth in grades 8 through 12 from across New Jersey and Pennsylvania who are working to create a more fair and just portrayal of history of today and the past regarding racial bias in school curriculum, and to provide educational opportunities to our communities on the topic of race. A one-year journey of FAIR has placed us here at Murray Grove Homecoming, presenting to you our first draft of an assembly that can be shared with youth in a school setting to better educate them on aspects of history that are often overlooked, and to make them better aware of the shortcomings of their school curriculum. From the beginning, we knew that we wanted to focus on how race was being portrayed in schools, and along the way, we have generated many ideas on how exactly we can reach our goal. An idea that we stuck with has been creating this assembly. After presenting our assembly with students at high schools, we are looking to help them to reflect on how they can make changes in their own curriculum. Our ultimate goal would be to work with the New Jersey Department of Ed to change the statewide curriculum. If we make the topic of race something that students can feel more comfortable discussing, this can lead them to be more open-minded. This is a pilot presentation on what we are looking to share in our assembly, but also a time for you to learn more about this issue and about the topic yourself.
Hi, my name is Jay Sean Saberman, and I've been one of the FAIR co-leaders now for almost a year. I go to a school where it's predominantly white, being one of the very few Black people. It's been a real struggle for the last couple of years. I've been made fun of because of my skin, been called the N-word, and be called out for acting white but clever in Black skin. I also live in a white family as I'm adopted, which can be a struggle at times. I've gotten looks from people who are not accepting of my situation, but over time, I've gotten used to it. Racism in this country has not been resolved. More people need to stand up to it so we, as human beings, can live a peacefully life. This is why I think being fair has helped me be able to speak out to speak out against all the injustices that have been happening in the country. If we don't do anything now, none of it will be resolved. I hope you consider this time to join FAIR so we can solve this problem. Thank you.
I'm involved in racial justice work because I live in a predominantly white area where race is very rarely discussed, and I see the dramatic repercussions that come along with this issue. Looking back on what I learned in my small town school in relation to race, the things I was being taught were extremely sugar-coated. In third grade, we dressed up as historical figures and invited the community to come to our school to see our presentations. One boy was Martin Luther King. He came to school in blackface and went the whole day with not one teacher or one community member raising up that this was an issue. As a third grader, I remember not thinking anything of it, but looking back on that day, I feel disgusted that that is what I thought. This is part of systemic racism. As an 8-year-old, I couldn't comprehend that this was wrong. But if race was something that was discussed in further detail to me at school, would I have still thought that way? Education has the power to change young minds, and there needs to be a greater focus on how we can create change to stop systemic racism in upcoming generations. As I have grown up in this area, I began to see that race was taking a larger role in my life. All around me, I hear white kids say the N-word and refer to people of minority groups as simply inferior people. Kids walk around town with Confederate flag hats as if it's a status symbol. I want to understand why these kids act and talk this way. Did they not understand why this is wrong simply because they were never taught it? Sometimes I wonder if only they were taught better in school from a young age that they wouldn't be acting like this. How can it be that the people we are trusting the next generation to teach about history are sugarcoating over the true facts? This is what has motivated me to do this work. I want to create change where race is a topic that people feel comfortable discussing and have a truthful understanding of its role in history. This is an issue that is prevalent in my community and others across the United States alike. I feel that a role needs to be taken to change the education system and the perspectives and views of so many people. FAIR has enabled me to take on that role along with other youth who are also so passionate about this topic.
Hello, my name is Abigail Reb. Throughout my entire educational career, I have been encouraged and guided through learning a complete and truthful history of the world and the United States. This was not due to the work of a public school, but of my mother, who has been involved in anti-racist and other community activism for over 20 years. She wanted my brothers and I to understand the entire history of America, the one that includes genocide, slavery, and extreme violence. It was important to her that we knew the truth, and that we were properly educated about the historic horrors created by a racist and oppressive system, because they are related to the modern horrors created by a racist and oppressive system. As I grew older, I became increasingly more aware of the problems in our society and felt an intrinsic need to help in whatever ways that I could. I began working for climate and racial justice in my small, largely conservative town. I received threats from students in the local high school for helping to organize Black Lives Matter protests, and after writing an essay displaying my concerns about the school's racist mascot, began receiving threats from adults in the school community. My small efforts to bring awareness to racism within the school's community were met with immediate disapproval and violence, displaying the sheer amount of ignorance and hate in the school district, both from students and staff. Since then, I have continued to fight racism within my old school district, as well as many around it. It is a difficult task that can feel almost impossible, especially when working in predominantly white conservative communities, but is work that needs to be done for the sake of youth who deserve to know what has really happened in history. As someone who is white, I feel that it is my job to work towards racial justice. It is my job to use my voice and my privilege to speak up and be actively anti-racist.
Hello, my name is Karina, and I've been a member of FAIR for about a year. I've always believed that diversity is part of what makes the United States so unique. If I had a map of the world spread out on a dartboard, I can almost guarantee that wherever the dart landed, that country's cuisine is offered in my area. For example, the best Vietnamese I ever had was on a college tour with my dad, and my family and I make an annual trip to a favorite Italian restaurant for my birthday. Two of my best friends are Indian, and I eat fantastically every time I'm over. There's a Colombian bakery around the corner from where I live, and I guess we're considered locals since the employees know our orders at a Mexican taqueria by my mall. As a kid, diversity meant lots of different places to eat, but growing up educated forces you to see the uglier sides of things. And sadly, many people choose to remain ignorant rather than face or confront the racism that diversity in America causes. The history I'm living through is revolutionary, and I'm only 17. The world I live in is changing, always changing, and a movement I'm proud to participate in is one that I believe will really change the world for the better. That said, lasting change never happens overnight. For almost a year, I've been a member of FAIR, a youth organization of Unitarian Universalists standing for faith, action, inclusivity representatives in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Our projects have included open discussions about current events and race relations, drafting letters to school districts about implementing anti-racism curriculum standards, writing an assembly to present to other youth, using social media to spread our messages. Because knowledge comes with age, and so does experience. I learned that diversity just doesn't mean various restaurants for a Friday night treat. It can mean prejudice, discrimination, and hate crimes, all falling under the ugly umbrella of racism. But I did learn that these things can be changed, and that by thinking globally and acting locally, I can change the world. FAIR is a youth-led group dedicated to achieving racial justice by focusing on issues that are important to us, the kids. I'd like to encourage any interested youth to join our group because every perspective is valued and unique, and no two persons' experiences with race are exactly the same. I'm proud to call myself a member of FAIR and would be happy to direct you to our co-leaders for more information about participating.
Hi, my name is Emily Robbins, and this is my personal story. So when I was little, I was never really taught the concept of slavery up until I reached about the 8th grade, and that was only because my school had reached the topic of the Civil War. We never really dove into depth about slavery. We kind of just knew it existed and more focused on the battles. And the main idea of what was taught to me was that the whole war was started by slave rights. I was kind of caught off guard when I heard this. When I first heard this even as a 8th grader, it just caught me off guard that it was so overlooked about people being held in bondage for their skin color not being listed as a cause for a war. When I was younger, I was never really aware of these problems. I've always grown up in a dominantly white neighborhood, so they never really showed up in my society. They were never there. All I really knew at that age was what my parents had taught me, and that had always just been like, treat people fairly, treat people the way you want to be treated, like the golden rule. Most of my knowledge on slavery, racial injustice, and other topics I had to teach myself. This all started at the start of quarantine with stories from the Black Lives Matter movement all over the news. At that point, my parents began to encourage me to educate myself so that I can help educate others and hopefully change the future. So I did. I bought books. I did a lot of research, and they even encouraged me to speak out for what I believed was right. And I did. Race has never really been a topic spoken about at my school, even now in high school. It's talked about in history classes, and we just talk about how terrible it is, but we don't fully teach about the injustices that still remain today about it. as growing up in a dominantly white area has definitely shown me that the system needs to change. We are lacking common education and all the stuff that a lot of people know are taught by themselves.
Next, I'd like to share an analogy for the phrase, all lives matter. I've never broken a bone, but my friend of color told me the story of when she broke her arm. She recalled it as the most unbearable pain she'd ever been in. She couldn't move her arm, but somehow, not moving hurt more than motion. When she arrived at the hospital, the doctor told her that all bones mattered when she specifically requested treatment for her arm. She knew all her bones were important and their condition was crucial to her overall health, but her arm was the bone that needed attention. The rest were fine and pain-free, but her arm was the bone that needed the doctor's help. When people reject Black Lives Matter by insisting that all lives matter, they're either proving one or two things, that they're missing the point of Black Lives Matter, or they're using the other slogan to display their blatant racism. It's the same concept as the Save the Turtles movement, except there's no counter slogan like screw the seahorses or we hate the whales. Somehow, the same people who understand that sea turtles need human help more than other ocean creatures fail to accept that Black oppression and discrimination they face is simply unacceptable. Now more than ever, it's important to be anti-racist instead of silently compliant bystanders.
Hello, my name is Abigail, and I have a question. Do you believe that history taught in public schools is complete? Why or why not? Yes, public schools do teach us history. Most public school curriculum teach Black history and Indigenous history. But do you believe that they are teaching a whole and complete history of people of color in this country and the sufferings caused by a racist and oppressive system? Currently, most students are taught history as a set narrative, hundreds of years compiled into a 600-page, 6-pound textbook recycled year after year. This is a narrative told from one point of view, one history, not histories. There have been many histories of this country. Every single one of your ancestors has their own, put together into a confusing and tangled mess to compose the national American story. It is not a secret that for the most part, this one history that has been constructed to teach our country's youth was written by white people, even more specifically, white men. It is not enough to learn the history in a crash course form, written from one group's point of view that leaves out large portions of the truth about our nation's history. This leaves us uninformed and more likely to continue on a path of ignorance and racism. If we do not properly learn about the problem, how can we be expected to fix it? School systems in the US don't have a great track record for representing and accurately portraying Black history in K through 12th grades. A report conducted by the National Museum of African American History in 2015 found that while almost all teachers acknowledge the gravity and importance of teaching Black history, only about 8.5% of time in history class is spent covering the subject. Another study showed that students around the country were familiar with the more famous names in Black history, such as Martin Luther King Jr. and Harriet Tubman, but were unable to recognize figures such as Claudette Colvin, Malcolm X, Ida B. Wells, and Frederick Douglass. What does this say about our school systems? What does it say about how much students know about the history of their own country? How can they be expected to understand the current
I have a blank about your name. It begins with A, Abigail. Let Zoe and Abigail are available to answer questions. Are there questions from online or from here that you'd like to ask them? Can you get them on the screen? Are they visible? Their camera's off. But can you hear us, Zoe?
Hi.
Hi. Okay. Oh, good. She's there already. Thank you, Zoe. That was a really awesome video that you all have created. Have you, is it possible for us, for example, to show that to youth groups in our own congregations?
Yeah, absolutely. It is an ever-evolving presentation, and this is our first kind of showing of it. So we're looking for, obviously we're going to add a lot more, but we're looking for any, kind of tips that you guys could add about our assembly. And definitely we can share the link to the video for sure. And then Abigail, do you want to just quickly point out the link that you put in the chat?
Yeah, I just put the link to the survey in the chat if you guys want to check that out.
Wonderful. Could you tell us what the survey is? You said a link to a survey?
Yes, it is a survey of some like moments in history and Black history that we wanted to see when people have learned and if they learned them in school, and just sort of to get a feel for that, more for when we do it in schools. But we thought it'd be interesting to see what your guys' experiences were.
Wonderful. This is a tech question. Is that being saved somewhere so those of us who aren't looking at the chat can access it?
I can send it somewhere else to an email or something if that works as well.
Okay, I'll talk with you and Zoe, but I would love to have it available to anybody who's watching this now. Anybody here have a question or a response to Zoe and Abigail? This is another Carol Watchler.
We can't hear her.
She asked if you were familiar with the Amistad Commission.
I am not. Abigail, are you?
Okay, let me just, can my mic be turned, can this mic be turned on?
We can hear you now.
Oh, okay, good, thanks. So this comes out of a piece of legislation a good number of years ago, but the kind of the impetus of it was renewed a couple years ago. And it is a commission that is it's hoping to do the kind of thing that you're doing, recognizing that there is so many such a lack and so many gaps in the education, and powered by some educators that just are so with you on this. And I would love to put you in touch with them so that they know what kind of resources you can bring, and you might also be aware of theirs. This is just beautifully exciting, and I really thank all of the young people that were courageous enough to make their statements at the beginning of this. So keep up the good work. You're doing really beautiful work.
Carol, do you want to just add?
Thank you so much.
That the Amistad Commission is New Jersey State Government, Department of Ed?
Okay, so let me just say that this is New Jersey, and this was a bill that was passed almost 20 years ago in the New Jersey legislature to direct the Department of Education to make the education much more whole and much more truthful and accurate around everything relating to the whole concept of slavery and the Middle Passage and the experience of African Americans. And right now, I think the people who are working on it are looking at other marginalized groups to be sure that their history is included in the kinds of things that are available for educators. And so this is a New Jersey initiative, and if there are other folks out there, I'm sure that you can find if there are similar things, or maybe take similar things to your state legislatures. So thanks for the opportunity to share that.
Let's see, ladies, I would, it seems like your project is very local. Have you considered working with some of the other congregations within the district or taking your project to General Assembly next year?
Yeah, so we currently have members from all over New Jersey and even some in PA. So the school districts that we would be working with would be, selected. We would start with 1 or 2 districts, likely in somewhere in New Jersey. But then after, we do some of those pilot presentations there, we would look to expand beyond those areas.
Is there anything that you would like from adults listening to your presentation? Are there ways that we can support you in the work you're doing, Zoe?
I really think just spreading the word about FAIR to youth who might be interested. We are definitely looking for more people to join us, and the more people, the better to get our word out. And so really just spreading the word to other youth who might be interested in joining.
Great, wonderful. Any other questions for Zoe and Abigail? I can't see the screen.
For some reason, Carol, we're not hearing you too well. The
Maybe
volume is not
into the
great.
microphone. I was asking if there were any other questions for Abigail and Zoe.
I'm not sure if the previous question, I think kind of summed up a couple of thoughts which I had about have your video been made public as yet, or that's coming out, is what you said?
Yeah, we actually just put together the video this week.
You just put it together.
Put it all
Gotcha.
together. Yeah, okay. And then we're also presenting at the UU Faith Action Fall Issues Conference on October 16th. So in the next 2 weeks, we're looking to make edits and add in anything else. And then probably after that, we'll have kind of a better video that incorporates more of the work we're looking to do in it. So yeah.
Is there any flyers in which you would be going out for that? Because I am located in Ohio, so.
Yeah, we do. We have a flyer for FAIR. I'm not sure the best way that we could get that sent out, but definitely when the link is put up there, maybe Mary Grove could share our final YouTube link to our video with everyone who was here today.
Zoe,
thank you,
I'm
Zoe.
gonna make a promise that I hope I can keep, and that is when Murray Grove does a wrap up of this whole homecoming. It's all been recorded, and I'm morally certain we will be sending something back to all the participants. We could include your information, your flyer, as something that we send to all the participants who've signed up for this homecoming, if that's something that you would like.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great. Thank you.
DM, I hope you're listening. Okay. Well, I believe we have just really enjoyed your presentation. We're honored to be the premiere of your video and wish you the best as you edit it and share it in other places. So thank you, Abigail and Zoe. And I really just want to honor you for the leadership you are taking in this area, and congratulate you for doing that. So we would like to applaud you for your work. And to everyone still online, this completes our program for the Saturday, and we have the final wrap up tomorrow morning, 10:30. Michael Tino will be the preacher at our service. That is, there's a special link that you received. You got a link for Friday, Saturday, and there's a separate link for Sunday. So you can join us then. And there will be the service at 10:30. And when that concludes, we will be doing one final event, which is to dedicate a ship, the Hand in Hand, A representation of the hand in hand has been created at Murray Grove. It is a combination of an historic marker and a playground. It's something that you can climb on, regardless of your age, you can climb on it. And we will be dedicating that ship as the close of our ceremony of the whole homecoming. So thank you everyone for being here last night and today, and welcome you again tomorrow morning. So that's it for tonight. Sleep well. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
When was the last time you had a vacation that was both relaxing and spiritual, rejuvenating and principled while tapping into your inner peace and inherent worth? Can't remember? Well, have we got a place for you. Murray Grove Retreat and Renewal Center in Lenoka Harbor, New Jersey. Come stay in one of our guest houses or try a more rustic break from life in one of our campsites. Sample the delicious food prepared by staff chefs. Relax under the shade of our many trees or take a hike to the bay by passing the site of Thomas Porter's original homestead. Be mindful and spend quiet time reflecting while walking the labyrinth. And don't forget, when it's time to cool off, take a dip in our refreshing pool. There are many local attractions as well as upcoming events right here on campus, which include the Joyous Women's Retreat in early November and the event of the year, Homecoming celebration right here at Murray Grove. For more information, visit murraygrove.org or call 609-693-5558. Thank you.